brilliant idea. It is the key to success. But here's the question: how do you know that you found it, and how do you take advantage of it? I am here with Gary Vaynerchuk, the cover man for the 100 Brilliant Ideas issue, and then also, digitally, the word ideas is so huge for us because those stories that say, you need an idea, here are a ton here are ways to find ideas, those things always do really well for us. By the way, I should introduce myself. I'm Jason Pfeiffer. I'm the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, and I'm, again, here with Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary, let's talk about ideas.
Sure.
I wanted you on this cover because you are so full of them. I think that you also inspire people to have ideas. But I think that the big question for a lot of people is, if they've got the energy, they've got the drive, they know they can put in the work, but they don't have the idea to focus all of that, They don't have the business idea. Where do the ideas come from?
I think the best way to come up with an idea is to reverse engineer what your day-to-day looks like. I actually think the ideas are directly in front of your face. I think the biggest problem with a lot of entrepreneurs is they're so hungry to build a business or to be an entrepreneur that they're sitting around trying to come up with the idea, which then immediately takes you out of usually the best idea. The best idea is, I'll never forget it, when Garrett Camp talked about Uber, he literally said, hey, we have iPhones now. Wouldn't it be cool if you could get a limo by pressing a button? And of course I remember saying, that's only for rich people. Wrong, but I think the ideas are, to me, the number one idea on earth is scratching your own itch. If you're living your life and you say that sucked, well, you've got a business. Because we really value time, we value convenience, and so I would walk around life, judge what stinks, and see if there's a way to make it better, and then hopefully you're not an anomaly and the only one that thinks it stinks.
Yeah.
And then that's how the idea comes to you, not you go and say, today I'm gonna come up with, nobody does that. People do it from an intuition, then it evolves.
Yeah, but how do you test it out, right? Because
By doing.
No,
but let's stay here.
Yeah.
By doing. Everybody thinks that they have to manifest this idea over time and come up with it perfect and then you go.
Yeah.
Ideas evolve. You get a seed. Microsoft wasn't what Microsoft was. Facebook isn't even remotely close to what Facebook, you've got to start with something. The biggest thing that's crippling entrepreneurs from winning is their lack of doing.
That they hold on too long.
100%. They romanticize around the idea. They think they've got an idea and then they spend the rest of this summer debating it until they're 7 months later and they haven't done anything, and then it just loses its energy. For me, I appreciate you saying I have a lot of good ideas. I have a good track record because the second I think I've got something, I go. I go.
Yeah.
And I lose money and I don't lose money and I try and I taste and I adjust and I stop. I'm not scared that somebody says that
that's a bad idea.
Yeah. My dad used to yell at me. He was like, you always change your mind. You said last year that we would never sell rosé wine. I'm like, I changed my mind.
And it's okay to change your mind. It's okay.
It's
okay
the cost.
It's
the cost of entry to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. You know what I think about that, and I think about entrepreneurs who just sit on the sidelines until their idea is so perfect, which of course never happens, and then they never jump. And then I think about how fortunate I am. I got to put this out every month. I have deadlines. It pushes you to. At some point, you have to say stop. Stop. We're done.
I think restrictions. I think rules are very valuable in that way when they're a macro. I think they're terrible in the micro because they become process and you get slow, but a macro, I think that's right, man. I think that's right. I think that's what's great about being an entrepreneur. When all the costs and everybody's livelihood is on your shoulders, all 750 people at VaynerMedia rely on me. If the business isn't profitable, it's not there. And that pressure creates the necessity to innovate, create, come up with ideas and execute.
And then you create that environment that allows for that constant pushing out of ideas. I mean, I'll tell you something, when I've worked at other magazines with larger staffs, and we would spend so much time overthinking everything, because you've got the people and you've got the culture that encourages that kind of constant thing, right? And so you'd end up with, I think, a product that was incrementally maybe better than it was 2-3 weeks ago, right? But you just wasted a whole bunch of time that you could have spent doing other things, making better products. Here we have such a small staff. I mean, you saw we walked around. It's,
I love it.
It's tiny out there, right?
I was pumped.
Yeah, it's tiny.
I'm literally going back to VaynerMedia right now and firing half the company.
Sorry about that, half the company. But yeah, it's tiny out there, and that's awesome because it
You know what
just
that
just
does?
means that you just have the right people and
It
you just
means
do
that you guys did not debate this pink and red color
No, we didn't.
too long.
No.
It had a few minutes, a few seconds, a day, whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that's right, man.
That's right. I saw 6 options. I saw 6 options, and I just was like, that one, done. Move
I
it
love
along.
it. I love it. I always tell my team at the agency, you know what's subjective? Creative. Creative subjective before it hits the world. Then it plays out. I go, you know what's not creative? Deadlines. Excuse me, subjective. You know what's not subjective? Deadlines.
Yeah.
Like, if the client wants it on Tuesday, you better put something in front of them. If you come on Thursday, because you guys all debated it to be perfect, and then you put it in front of somebody, and they don't like it, then you've lost twice. I think that's right. I'm thrilled to hear that you guys deployed that speed, and I think the necessity of deadline and small team is a huge advantage. And you should always take, if you're David, play David's game. If you're Goliath, play Goliath's game. And I think for all the entrepreneurs that are watching right now, play to your strengths.
Yeah. Have you had to switch from one to the other? Because I mean, I have. You know, like I was with larger staffs. Had that perfectionist mindset, and when I came here, it took some adjustment to say, you know what, this story doesn't need 5 more
Mine's
reads.
the reverse. I start with small things.
Yeah.
Wine Library was a family local liquor store. VaynerMedia was a nothing. And I build them and they get big. And so then what I have is when you have a 13-year-old child, I have an 8-year-old, so like a 13-year-old child, you're like, oh, they're not 2 anymore. They're not cuddly, but they've got other values. And so, yeah, I've had to deal with it because the size of my companies go from 0 or 10 to 300 or 800, and you're dealing with a different animal. But to me, it hasn't been from there to there. I love it so much when it's small that it makes me start completely new businesses to get the high of that entrepreneurial spirit at a smaller scale.
Yeah. So do you think often back to how you were doing things when you were small as inspiration for keeping that kind of ethos?
I don't even break from the ethos. The machine runs outside of me. And so like what I try to do is inject that DNA back into the machine. So I'm inspired by my day to day, not what I used to be like.
Yeah.
I'm still doing it, right? Like right before we went on camera, you're like, wait a minute, I didn't really realize until this how hectic, how on you actually are for 15, 16 hours a day. My speed, which is what I'm really talking about here, and that's the game, it's speed. Entrepreneurship is sports. Speed kills. My speed is at an all-time high. What I have to do is make sure that the organizations match my energy, and there is a disconnect at times, and sometimes greater than others. That's when I have to use me to inject back in.
Right, and the answer to the question of why the videos people see of you are so good, why the audio they hear is so strong, and the reason is because you're in the habit of doing it all the time. Right?
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Because that makes a lot of sense when I read that, I saw that because I used to think like, is he just kind of taking parts out of his day and kind of setting that up and maybe thinking about what it is, right? But I think that the more you get in the habit of just doing everything all the time, if you're a constant idea generator, some of the best people in my industry, they're just spitting out ideas all day.
Yeah, makes sense.
And a lot of them aren't that good, but they're just in the habit of constantly producing them, which means that you never have to have that time when you're just sitting down being like, shit, I need an idea.
I think that's right. I think that's exactly right.
So, all right, last question, and then and we'll let you get on with the day. How do you know? Because you said that the key to knowing if an idea is good is doing. How do you know when to stop? How do you know when to move to the next idea if it's not working?
There's only 2 things: the market tells you, or you tell yourself. Right? Like you move on when nobody's buying your shit. You're like, but I knew this was going to work, and nobody's buying it. The market told you to move on. I really think you're gonna buy this. And they start buying it and you're doing great, but somehow you're waking up miserable every day, it's time to move on. So no golden handcuffs, right? Don't let the dollar amounts get you to a place where 30 years later you look back, you might have made some money, but you were miserable for 30 years.
Yeah.
The other one's very easy. The market tells you to move on. So the only decision you have to make is, if it's going well, are you enjoying it enough for the financial benefit? And if you're not, you have to move on.
Yeah. Gary Mann.
Thanks.
Thrilled to have you on the cover.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very, very humbled.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.